Abortion is the wickedest sin our nation has yet embraced. Worse even than enslaving our fellow man is killing him, stealing not just his liberty, but his very life. But abortion doesn't only destroy a nation's righteousness, it plunges mothers and fathers into darkness, changing them forever. But with Christ, there's a path out of the dark and into eternal light. I'm Hayden Ludwig. We're joined by one such product of God's redemptive power, Toni McFadden, whose journey from unplanned pregnancy to pro-life hero led her through the doors of an abortion facility and out again, a transformed woman. You'll hear her story and more today on Restoration Spotlight. Toni, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to begin at the beginning, which is to say your story of obtaining an abortion as a teenager, and then how the Lord led you out of that deep pit into becoming a champion for the unborn. So please share that with us.
Yes, so I was a senior in high school and obviously wasn't expecting this to happen. I don't think anyone in this situation thinks it's going to happen to them. And I've been dating my boyfriend off and on for about 2 years. It wasn't the most stable relationship. And when he found out, the first thing he said to me was, "You don't want to keep it, do you?" And my best friend at the time, who I told, said, "You cannot keep this baby." And so those were the only two voices that I heard, which I often challenge people to be careful who the people you let in your life to influence you.
Yes.
Which is why I adore pregnancy resource centers, because they are stepping into the front lines and being able to speak truth to this girl in this moment when she can't see beyond her crisis. Now, at this time in my life, I did not know about pregnancy resource centers. And the only thing I was thinking was, I don't want to be pregnant. I don't want my parents to find out. And I want to somehow keep this relationship that I have. And so I made the appointment. And this was maybe 19. Let me see.
Don't date yourself here. Yes.
Yeah, I'm aging myself. I was about 18 years old.
2000s, yeah.
Yeah. So at that time, what I notice now, knowing what I know now, Planned Parenthood has always been deceptive. And I remember calling them and them telling me that they were going to give me a new name, so that when they called my house to remind me of my appointment, and just in case one of my parents answered, they would say this name, so I knew it was them calling.
Ah, wow.
And yeah, looking back at that now, I'm like, how deceptive is that? Because they did not want my parents to be involved, because what if they helped me change my mind? So I ended up going to the appointment. My boyfriend came, my best friend came, and I remember sitting in this tiny waiting room. I was very uncomfortable. I was very uneasy, but I also thought this was my only way out. I thought, if I have this abortion, my parents will never find out, and my unstable relationship would have some kind of fighting chance, and life would go back as normal. And as you know, this is not a normal thing to do. There's nothing normal about taking the life of your own. And I wish I would have known then how much that would change me. And so I was given the chemical abortion pills, the ones that are very prevalent right now that you can get online.
Mifepristone and misoprostol. Yes.
Yes. And at the time, the doctor had said to me, we're going to give you the first set here, and then 24 to 48 hours later, you're going to take the second set. And I just remember, even after taking the first set, he said to me, "This will end the pregnancy." And I didn't know I knew what that meant, but I didn't know that would starve the baby to death. They didn't go through the details of what this drug does. And as I mentioned earlier, I thought doing this would help my relationship, but he actually ended up breaking up with me the day after he brought me there. And
goodness.
My relationship ends there. I still hadn't taken the pills yet before I kind of noticed he wasn't calling me back or communicating with me. But I took the other set of pills at my best friend's house, and nothing really happened. And so I ended up calling the Planned Parenthood again. And this time they were not as nice to me. And maybe it's because they already had my money. But they said to me, this is why we gave you 2 sets of pills. So just take the second set and you'll be fine. And I took the second set and I spotted a little bit, but that was it. Now, I didn't mention this before, but when I was at the abortion clinic, I got an ultrasound. And unfortunately, well, for them, they faced the screen to the wall, so I couldn't see it. And I later found out the only reason they gave me the ultrasound was to see how far along I was, so they knew how much to charge me for the abortion.
Is that right? Unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, very believable, but wow.
Yeah. Well, and I even asked her if she could turn the screen around. It was a nurse, and she was very agitated with me because I asked that question. She was
why would you want to see your child? Right.
Yeah. Why would you want to? Because, pregnancy resource centers, they have the big screen, up, yes. And they want you to see the value of life that you have carrying in your womb, but they don't want you to see that. So that's very telling. It's evil, really.
It is evil.
It is very evil. And we'll talk about this probably later, but I take my own responsibility as well. But they do place their hand in the fact that they don't want to tell the woman, everything. They want her to just make a decision that is not fully formed with all the education that she needs.
Yeah, they railroad you into that decision they want you to take.
Yes. And that's why I respect pregnancy resource centers so much, is because obviously they want the woman to be cared for. They want the baby to be protected, but they're going to tell you everything. So you're not shocked. If you choose to have an abortion, this is what's going to happen. They're not going to tell you that the abortion, they're not even going to bring up wanting to save the baby at all. Yes. But they're also deceptive in telling you what's going to happen in an abortion procedure, because I remember the doctor saying to me, it'll just be like a heavy period, is what he told me. And that's not what happened, because I ended up severely hemorrhaging about a month later while I was in school. And when I say severely hemorrhaging, I'm sure people have seen Abby Johnson's movie Unplanned. Mm-hmm. They are not over-exaggerating with the blood that you lose and how traumatizing it is. And mine started in school. I had blood clots the size of my fist leaving my body.
Oh,
and God. I was so uneducated at the time that I had no idea what was happening. And I remember lying to my mom because I had to continue to cover up this lie that I just had bad cramps. And I remember her taking me home and for hours going from the bathroom to my bed, which potentially I probably could have died from. But by the grace of God, because he is so generous and forgiving, even while I was running away from him, chose to spare my life, even though I didn't spare one of his.
That's right. And Toni, I do want to talk about your transformation and how you became the champion that you are today. But you did bring up a really important point I want to stick with. So you received a chemical abortion, right? You use the abortion drugs that are now so common. You can buy them through the mail and show up and do all of this from home. You don't even need to get an ultrasound at a Planned Parenthood. You can do all of this stuff more or less in sheer ignorance from the comfort of your own bathroom here. And there's studies now, my colleagues at the Restoration of America Foundation released one in spring 2025 that showed that nearly 1 in 10 women will suffer that kind of severe blood clotting and hemorrhaging all the way up to death. And that's just 1 in 10 women. 85% of women who take mifepristone, the abortion drug, will experience nausea or vomiting, something non-severe, but still very, very unpleasant. Now, the law says you have to sign a waiver saying you understand the risks. But what you're saying is, hey, I may have signed something, but there's no way I was really, truly giving my full consent here, because they're not telling a teenage girl, do you know that you might be one of the 10 who dies from all of this? It doesn't strike me as what Planned Parenthood does.
Oh, they didn't tell me any of that. And I didn't sign anything. And some women have said that they've had like counseling before they go through I never had any of that. And I think the nurse should have picked up that that I was nervous, that I was hesitant, especially because I asked to see the screen. But no, they have an agenda, and their agenda is not the woman. Their agenda is financial gain.
That's unbelievable. So let's go back to your story for a moment. So finish the tale of how you went from that shattered teenager who had experienced an abortion to where you are now.
Well, I always tell people my favorite 2 words are "but God." And it was about 3 years after I had the abortion that I did end up going off to college, but it wasn't right after I graduated from high school. So even though I went through the abortion for these certain reasons, I still didn't follow through with those things. So I didn't start college to a couple of years later, but then I ended up going to Westchester University, and it was there that I became a Christian. I went to a meeting with an organization called Campus Crusade for Christ, now called Cru. And it was there that the Lord really began to just show me my heart apart from him. And it was almost like he set up the whole night for me. I remember walking into this huge room with about 300 college students, which is on a Thursday night, which I bring up Thursday for a reason, because on college campus, it's called Thirsty Thursday, where most college students are going out and drinking. And these 300 or so college students were dedicating their Thursday night to the Lord. And
thirsty for the word. I love it. That's amazing.
It was just amazing to walk in this room and see their parents aren't making them come here. They're coming here because they're choosing to come here. And I couldn't articulate it then, but they had a peace that my heart was searching for. And that peace wasn't going to come from going through all these different relationships or, a job or a career or anything like that. It was going to be in Jesus Christ. And so I remember going back to my dorm room that night, and my roommate had gone home early, and I had the whole room to myself. And I just remember crying out to God in this simple, like childlike prayer, because I didn't know much, but what I did know was I wanted to change, and I didn't know how. And I tell people, the Lord loves to use a broken and contrite heart. And I just realized in this moment that I don't know who I am. I don't like who I am. And I know I've made decisions in my life that I regret, and I don't know what to do with it. And the Lord stepped into my life. He surrounded me with people who were living out his word, who loved his word, and began to mentor me. And very quickly, my worldview began to change because of my love for the word of God. And because of that, of course, God brought up things that he wanted to heal me from. And one of those things was abortion. Now, that did take a couple of years because honestly, I was afraid that Christians wouldn't forgive me for this. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, God forgives me, but I'll just keep it between him and I. I won't tell anyone, but, God's too good to keep us where we are. And our testimonies really aren't about us. It's about setting other people free. And so and by the time I graduated college, I ended up working for a pregnancy resource center. And that's where my real healing began. I started going through post-abortion counseling through a Bible study called Forgiven and Set Free. And not only that, but I would go into middle schools and high schools and colleges and speak on saving sex for marriage, because that's now the standard I have been living because of my love for Christ and the new standard he had put in my life. And, this was a beautiful picture of just the start of his redemption in my life, going into a classroom and telling students what I longed to hear when I was their age, that they wait until they're married, that it's possible, and there's a beauty in waiting. And at the time, I was not married. And so what I would tell them is, one day, someday down the road, I would like to get married. And so what I'm doing right now by abstaining is I'm loving my husband now. I'm choosing to love him by my actions, by choosing not to go out and do what the culture says. And that was something very different than what these kids were hearing, on TV, on their phones and all that kind of stuff. And so, but it was something that they were longing to hear as well. But I was also giving them a picture of, this is how I was before. This is what I'm living out now. And so that's where, God showed me through my actions as well that this was worth it, even though it was difficult. And he wasn't done with the redemption part yet, this is my favorite part to tell, was that about 10 years later, the same guy I had the abortion with actually came back to apologize to me.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah, and it had been years for him, but he had become a believer through, he was struggling with a lot of addiction issues. And I didn't know much about his life after we broke up, but he went through a program called Teen Challenge. Not sure if you're familiar with Teen Challenge. They're all in the United States. But it's a faith-based drug and alcohol rehabilitation program. And he went through that and became a believer through going through that program. And the Lord put me on his heart as someone that he needed to come back and apologize to. And he decided to do that face to face with me, which obviously that was very nerve-wracking for me in the sense of, I had forgiven him, but it's very different when you're looking someone in the face and having to forgive them.
No
kidding. And I've been sharing our story in the classroom for over 6 years. But this made it more real, I guess, because I never thought I would see him ever again. And I will never forget sitting across from him and him saying to me, the reason I left that relationship, and just basically he said the words, I acted like a little boy. And I wasn't being responsible because I didn't want to have to face the fact that we ended the life of our own child. And so in that moment, what that said to me was, abortion does not just affect women, but it also affects men. And I believe it affects men because God has created men to lead and to protect. And he realized that he did not do that he did not protect the most vulnerable, and he did not protect me in that process. And so not only that, but after reconciling and truly forgiving him through that, less than a year later, he's actually the one that I married.
Wow. I have to just pause. I mean, that's one of those beautiful stories I've ever heard. I'm not exaggerating. That is, Toni, it always astonishes me just, how badly we humans can muck things up for ourselves and other people. But
yeah.
Only God has the ability to take something good and light out of that darkness. I can only create more darkness. He can have it doesn't mean that the abortion's a good thing, but you can see the beauty and goodness of what he can do, even with something awful that we ourselves create. I want to thank you for sharing that. That was incredible.
You're welcome.
You talked about the degradation of sex in our society, which is one of the important themes of your ministry, Relationships Matter. And that is such a massive theme, because obviously without that degradation, you don't have a massive nationwide abortion problem like we do in the United States. Wasn't really the case before Roe v. Wade and before the sexual revolution of the 1960s. And I think one of the things that people don't understand is the opposite of free love is not living in the monastery divided by sex, right? It's actually a faithful husband and wife. Yeah. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. So why do you think that is? And what's the path towards a restoration of that biblical understanding of healthy sex lives in the context of marriage?
Yeah, that is a great question. And for me personally, I didn't respect sex until God showed me that he's the one that created it. The culture did not create sex. He did. And in the right context, it's beautiful. But we're getting so many messages constantly, and obviously having a sinful nature, because God did create us as sexual beings. However,
That's right.
God is a God of order. And this is not supposed to be easy to do. If it was easy, everyone would wait. But I agree that I don't believe the abortion rate will go down until people start respecting sex and relationships in the right context with God. And so I don't think I would have ever respected it if I didn't come into a right relationship with God. Until you can't even have a healthy relationship, whether it's with a spouse or a friend or your siblings, unless you have a good relationship with the Lord first, because that's where that pours out of, because there's no good in us apart from Christ. So I think it's so important for the church to be speaking on this. The church does not speak on healthy relationships and sex like they should.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're expecting teenagers or whatever to kind of figure it out. And my husband and I, we've been blessed with 4 children, ages 15, 14, 13, and 11. So we're at that. I know it's a lot of them. It's great. And we're having those conversations. We've been very open with them. And I think that's part of it, because I think the enemy and our flesh wants us to, we don't need to go there. Or they got no, I'm over communicative with my older children, because I know what they're facing. I know the enemy just doesn't want them to know. And I think it's very important for a parent's voice to be leading their children, because of all the other voices they could be hearing. And I'm seeing the effects of that, especially with my children. They know our story. And I have told my oldest children that, obviously we hold a standard for you, that you wait until you're married, and we've told them the why behind waiting, and praying that it makes sense for them, not just because we told you so. And that's okay for now, because they're living under our roof. So that's okay. But I have often also said to them that if for some reason you do mess up and you get pregnant, or you get a girl pregnant, which is the last thing I would ever want, but if it does, please don't think that you can't come home. And I think it's very important for them to know that we will out together, that you don't have to run to abortion, or you don't have to hide, but that you can always come home, whether it's not just when you're having great behavior, but also when you're struggling. And so I've said that so many times that my kids are like, we know. So, but
we know,
I don't want me to be able to speak into that if something were to happen. And if they have a friend that's in that situation, I want them to know what to say to them and where they could get help, even if it's not them in that type of situation. But I think it starts at home, honestly.
I want to point out a pattern of something you said now. The enemy doesn't want your children to know about good sex versus sinful sex, just in the same way that the abortionist doesn't want you to know that you have a choice not to carry through. You may have made a series of bad decisions leading up to this point. You don't need to compound it with one more. Mm-hmm. What I'm seeing here is we already have a knowledge of evil since the garden. Yeah. What the enemy doesn't want us to have is a knowledge of the good news, right? Of you can actually live a different way. There is a God who can redeem you and transform you. You will not die broken and self-hating, even if you feel it that way right now. That's incredible. I mean, the fact that we should have the gospel pouring forth through the church into every aspect of our lives. This is still fundamentally a Christian nation, even if it's very apostate right now. And yet we've allowed the enemy, as Christians, as part of the church, to obscure that light for so long that there are now whole segments of our population in cities founded by Christians hundreds of years ago, who don't know anything about the gospel, don't know anything about Jesus. And it seems to me you're right. Starting there, and also starting with the family, That's how you solve a lot of these problems, by going upstream to the source.
Right. And I think specifically too, for the Black community, that's even more difficult. And I'm sure you've heard the statistics that the number one killer in the Black community is not Black on Black crime. It's not police brutality. It's not drugs or alcohol or heart disease. It's abortion.
That's right.
We only make up 13% of the population, yet we account for 40% of the abortions, which, there's always been a target ever since Margaret Sanger stepped on the scene. Her target was the Black community. We know her infamous line is, "We don't want word to get out that we want to eliminate the Black population." And
it was called the Negro Project of the South.
Negro Project.
Yes. Very explicit.
We're still seeing the effects of her legacy.
That's right.
Even now. And that is another reason I speak out on this. And at first, it was just my testimony. But I believe, it might have been 2019 when Governor Cuomo passed the law that you could abort all the way up to 9 months in New York, and they lit the World Trade Center up in pink.
Right.
I was so sick to my stomach that I was like, I have to go beyond my story at this point. Like, I'm glad I have a redemptive story to tell, but this goes even deeper in the sense of being a Black woman speaking on this. And the Black community, to be honest, is the hardest community to speak to when it comes to abortion, because we have those who claim they're believers, but yet still say that abortion is okay. And we have HBCUs that are the historical Black colleges that are in bed with Planned Parenthood. I've tried to speak at multiple HBCUs, and it is very difficult to do that.
I believe it. They've managed to capture the institutions. We now have about 1.1 million abortions a year nationwide. That is approaching a 20-year high, meaning the curve was going down like this from the 1980s. We're now headed back up to circa 2000 levels, and it could get back up to 1980s levels. Something I read the other day has always stuck with me. There have been about 65 million abortions in the United States since Roe v. Wade, 52 years ago, almost 53 years ago now. Of the 65 million, 50 million were millennials or Gen Z. Those are already large generations. Think how much larger they would be. That's fascinating to think that, there should be, maybe 4 more of me for every one of me that there are, as speaking as a young millennial. That's profound. And I've often thought it's going to get darker before it gets better, because the enemy's tool, something like mifepristone, the abortion pill, being able to mail it to your home, is so available and so preponderant. So I guess my question to you, Toni, is it took us 50 years to overturn Roe v. Wade, and the whole pro-life movement was on the same page, very disciplined, very focused, and that was a smashing success. But now, in the wake of all of that, abortion has gone up. And it seems to me it's not that pro-lifers don't care, it's that there's no unity, rather, and unity of purpose specifically in here's how we combat that. I rarely hear pro-lifers, excepting yourself, of course, who talk about how widespread the abortion pill access has become just since COVID, for instance, only 4 or 5 years ago. How do we begin to educate the pro-life activist networks and the churches on the fight is far from over? In fact, it might be worse than ever. And if you don't start fighting back now, you may not have another 50 years to defeat the next Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, because if the rate continues for the Black community, we're going to be exterminated.
You won't exist.
We're not going to exist if this keeps happening. That is a really difficult question to answer, because I think all the different denominations and some are very strategic and doing a great job sharing about abortion and being in educating people, but it has to go even beyond educating. Like, I look at the people who are standing outside of the Planned Parenthoods and doing what God has called. Not everyone is called to do that, but do what everyone is called to speak out for those who can't speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, whatever capacity, that is supposed to look like. Whether that is in lawmaking, if you're good at that, do it. Don't hesitate. Don't let fear dictate what you do or don't do, because lives are at stake. We're on the right side of history when it comes to defending babies in the womb. And I think there are organizations like, for instance, Pro Love Ministries, Abby Johnson, where they're doing a holistic help for the woman, where they're helping her sometimes get housing, helping her get a car, helping her financially, because I can understand women are like, I don't have this, and this. How am I going to bring? But we want to alleviate those fears. We can handle those things. And so I think, raising awareness as much as we can, fighting without division, which is really hard. I don't know why there's division. Yeah. We're on the same team. We want to protect these women and we want to protect the baby as well. And so I think also the abortion pill reversal is amazing as well. And, evil is evil. And it will find a way, which is why I think they turned this way of like sending it through the mail, because they're showing who they are. They do not care about these women. How many stories have you seen of like a boyfriend putting it in their girlfriend's drink or something because they don't want? It's insane to me. And so we're called to step in and expose the darkness, whatever capacity that looks like. And I think abortion is the greatest evil that we have right now.
Yeah, far worse than slavery. At least in slavery, you had life. You could have children. In this case, it's suicide. It's hate yourself and hate your children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, as we close out, please.
I'm sorry. And I do think pastors need to step up and speak on this, not just going to the March for Life, not just speaking on it on Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. Like, let it be a part of your culture and the church to defend and protect babies in the womb.
I'm so glad you said that. I was going to ask you, as we close out here, what is your counsel to a young woman who may or may not be a Christian, may or may not have any family or resources to turn to, who's terrified by the prospect of the alternative to not killing my child is to raise a child potentially by myself because my boyfriend's run off? The woman who finds herself in the situation you found yourself in comes to you. What are the resources she has? What's the counsel you provide her?
Well, the counseling is going to look a little bit different based on the woman I'm talking to, because I want to see her. I don't want to do like a cookie cutter. I want to hear her. I want to hear exactly where her fears are, because sometimes they're different across the board. But there's so many resources. Actually, pregnancy resource centers outnumber the number of Planned Parenthoods.
Is that
greatly.
Right?
And so, yeah.
Shame on me for not knowing that.
We may not have all the funds to the taxpayer dollars to do our marketing the same way, but we do outnumber Planned Parenthoods. And so there is optionline.org. If you just punch in your zip code, it will show you all the pregnancy resource centers that are in your state and which ones that are closest to you. And so that is one resource I would give. As I mentioned before, Pro Love Ministries. Not only are they going to get resources, but they're also going to get counseling. And I think that's very important for a woman who's choosing to keep her child, that she has the resources, but also she's bettering her life for who she is as well. And I've seen that across the board. I used to counsel for Pro Love Ministries. And so I've seen how beautiful their ministry is meeting women in these when they're fearful and scared. Also, adoption is an option as well, which is exactly what I do now. I do counseling with abiding love, which I counsel women who place their babies for adoption. If they don't feel like they can care for this baby, obviously the best result would be for her to parent. But if she really feels that she cannot, there is an avenue to go that way. A Christian organization that is not just about money, but it's about protecting this baby and also giving counseling to this woman who it's a very difficult decision to make as well.
Yes, I think it is absolutely true that the left is very powerful and the darkness is darker than it's ever been. But everything you've laid out shows there are more resources to combat that, to fight back. I do actually believe we won't have another 50 years of these things. I think we're actually looking at the very end of this long and arduous battlefield. But, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But anyway, Toni McFadden, thank you so much for joining us. It was just wonderful hearing your story and more about you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative, pro-life journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. Until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.